Good morning, everybody. Good morning, all you magnificent melon heads of the world, and happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is June 17th, 2025. The top story this morning, it's once again the Middle East. There was kind of a scare last night. How do I say kind of a scare? It's hard to use that phrase in the context of missiles flying back and forth across the sky. But everybody's been really worried, at least globally, at least financially related. Everybody's been so worried about the Strait of Hormuz. And last night, unconfirmed reports started circulating on social media of ships in flames in the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of the UAE. And it looked like there was satellite data from NASA that confirmed something was burning in the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, oil shot up about $1 and change on that news. Everybody was worried. Is this it? Are the Iranians shutting down the Strait of Hormuz? The answer is no, at least not yet. It was kind of close. It looks like there was a collision between two tankers. And at least what they're saying this morning is that this collision is not security related. It's kind of an interesting phrasing there. It's just a way of saying the Iranians didn't shoot at it. It wasn't a missile or a drone or a speedboat attack. They ran into each other. Now, that's not to say that the reason for this collision and this fire between these oil tankers has nothing to do with the Israeli-Iranian conflict. It does, actually. It looks like this conflict may have actually been the direct cause of this collision, along with a little bit of human error sprinkled on top. But at the very least, it wasn't the Iranians shooting at boats. So that remains not an issue. That remains a card that the Iranians could play if they decide to, but they haven't decided to play it yet. We talked about that all day yesterday. Look, it's going to hurt the Chinese more than anybody or the Europeans more than anybody. It doesn't really hurt the Israelis. It doesn't hurt the U.S. as much as it might have a few years ago. And so the Iranians are still not doing that. That being said, there was a lot of developments around what was happening in Israel yesterday. You had President Trump left the G7 early yesterday, said he's going back to go to the Situation Room. There was a lot of people were worried that this meant the United States was going to bomb Iran last night, that people were freaking out on Twitter last night over this. My moderator, Mish, had a pretty good point there. Trump probably just wanted an excuse to leave the G7 because he just didn't want to be there. He doesn't like the other people at the meeting. The feeling is mutual. And really, it seemed like there was a pretty funny article in Bloomberg this morning. The entire, the highest hopes for the G7 summit this year was that President Trump didn't throw a fit and then rage quit in the middle of the meeting for everybody to see. And it looks like that didn't happen. He just kind of got up and left. Now, this was happening simultaneously for 2 nights in a row. There's been a lot of talk in these OSINT channels about this big U.S. airlift campaign that's going on. We've seen refueling tankers and these big C-17 cargo planes all leaving the U.S., heading out over the Atlantic towards the Middle East. And now people are wondering, well, what does this mean between Trump leaving the G7, the airlift that's going on? The question is the U.S. going to get involved? Now, there's one plausible scenario when the U.S. might get involved. And keep in mind, I'm not advocating for this outcome. I'm just saying this is the plausible scenario where it might happen. The Israelis have been operating with impunity over Iranian airspace. A couple of people got butthurt over that comment yesterday. Oh, well, boo-hoo, Crimea River. If you really think that's not happening, feel free to show me pictures of all of these jets that the Iranians claim they've shot down. Hint, there aren't any because they haven't done it. But what the Israelis don't have is the bunker buster capabilities to take out these deep underground nuclear facilities. They've been trying. They've been hitting them for several days with traditional munitions and some of the smaller bunker busters that they have. But it looks like that has not had the desired effect. They have hit almost all of the above ground nuclear facilities, but those deep underground, heavily reinforced bunkers have not been taken out. And we are the only country that has the capability to take out those bunkers. We have the big 20,000-pound GBU 57, the MOP, the massive ordnance penetrator. It's basically the largest sub-nuclear munition in the U.S. arsenal. We're the only ones who have it. And it's not that we can just give it to the Israelis and let them use it, because the Israelis don't have the heavy bombers that can deliver that. And if you really want to finish off the Iranian nuclear program, That's what has to happen. If we really want to just kill it and not negotiate it away, that's got to happen. So that is the plausible scenario where the U.S. would get involved in this conflict, is if we just decided, you know what, the prospects of trying to talk the Iranians out of building a nuclear weapon is just not going to work. The fighting has already started. Just drop them up. That's probably the only realistic scenario when we would get involved. And other than that, we wouldn't have to get involved because the Israelis have been doing pretty well in this conflict. I mean, they've gotten plenty of bloody noses. Plenty of these Iranian missiles are getting through. Iran spent all day yesterday talking about the greatest missile barrage in the history is coming and all this other stuff. And then it was like 10 missiles and they all got intercepted. So it looks like the Iranians' ability to continue raining down these barrages is slowly weakening. Keep in mind, while that's happening, the Israelis' ability to intercept those missiles is also being weakened. It's a silly war of attrition. There's still time to switch it off, and there's no need to get involved. I mean, at the end of the day, why is just like knock this crap off not an option? How about we stop bombing each other? We stop financing terrorism all over the world, and we just go back to doing business. Is this so hard? Apparently it is. I don't understand why it's so hard. It seems pretty straightforward to me, but just knock your shit off. Seems, I don't know. Anyway, that's going on this morning. Also, we've got solar stocks are getting clobbered this morning. The Senate has released their version of the big, beautiful bill. Some people use that phrase seriously. Some people use that phrase mockingly. That's just the name of it, the big, beautiful bill now. Either way, the House version and the Senate version, both of them are stripping out the wind and solar subsidies that were passed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act in order to pay for the bill. The House version had stripped out all of the energy subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. It looks like the Senate version puts back some things like nuclear, like hydro and geothermal power. But either way, the wind and solar is out. And so names like First Solar, Enphase Energy, they are down double-digit percentages, some of them almost 20% this morning on that news. Look, the wind and solar industry cannot stand on its own. It's been propped up by endless subsidies for decades. And if you can't do it without the subsidies, then sorry, we tried. That's pretty much what it comes down to. And wind and solar have had one very difficult thing. I mean, I knock them all the time. They don't work most of the time. That's the problem. We need a reliable power grid that works 24/7, not when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. And we still, no matter how much engineering we do and no matter how much, innovation happens, we cannot change the freaking weather. We cannot change the fact that night happens reliably every day. And I have no reason to suspect night is going to stop happening reliably every day forever. And so, unless you want to just shut everything off when the sun goes down, solar's a silly idea. Also, we have got OpenAI and Microsoft. Big fight going on with OpenAI and Microsoft. OpenAI is supposedly considering filing an antitrust complaint against Microsoft. Look, these two companies, they're partners, but they're also competitors. And we've kind of watched this slow breakup between these two companies over the last couple of days. Microsoft has access to all of OpenAI's intellectual property as part of the multi-billion-dollar investment they made in OpenAI. But now Microsoft is a competitor to OpenAI, so it's kind of weird to have like your business partner is also your competitor. And at the end of the day, OpenAI wants to become a for-profit company. This is a time to remind you that OpenAI, believe it or not, is a charity. Yeah, it is. It's apparently charity work pays very well for Sam Altman. He's done all right for himself, being all benevolent and helping humanity and everything. Good job, Sam, with your charity work. Gag me. But OpenAI wants to become a for-profit company. Microsoft has largely stood in the way of that. And OpenAI has $20 billion of funding on the line. They raised all this money, or they got promises for all this money from SoftBank and other firms, but they are all contingent upon OpenAI successfully transitioning to a for-profit company before the end of this year. And, well, this year is about halfway over, so they got a lot of money on the line here. They need to make this happen. We also got a lot of economic data. We got retail sales were down for the month of May, largely because of autos. We got import prices were flat. Export prices went down. I suspect that's largely because of ethane exports to China. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we got silver knocking on $37 right now. It actually briefly touched $37 this morning before selling off a little bit. I like the shiny. That gold to silver ratio continues to decline, but remains at elevated levels. We got a lot to talk about this morning. Why don't we shrink my big melon of a head and let's see what's happening in the world of finance this morning. And hey, don't forget that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we do this every day. So come back and have your coffee with the melon heads tomorrow. Right now, the S&P is down by about 31 points or 0.5%. We've got the Dow is down also a little more than 0.5%, 0.57% lower, 241 points to the downside for the Dow, offsetting some of those gains from yesterday. And the NASDAQ is off by 124 points or also 0.57%. So the stocks are in the red this morning. We've got a dollar that's pretty much unchanged here at 98.18. We were briefly in the 97 area, or we had that 97 handle yesterday, but the dollar continues to be well off or well below the levels it had traded at for most of the last few years. Looking over at the bond market, I am remiss because I don't have the U.S. yield curve ready to be queued up here. All right, we have got yields are largely lower, showing us higher bond prices this morning. The 30-year Treasury, 4.923. That yield is down by about 3 basis points. The 10-year yield is at 4.416, off by 3 points and change. The 2 years at 3.954, off by 1.5 points. And the 1 month is little changed at 4.200, off by pretty much a fraction of 1 point. Looking over at the commodities board, metals are looking good here. We got gold is up. Spot gold is up by about $9 or 0.25%, $3,394. Gold is off just off its recent highs. Silver, though, looking really good this morning. We've got spot silver. Come on, there he is. $37 for spot silver, up by 68 cents this morning, or about 1.9% higher. We've got the front month silver contract for July is at $37.07 here. So my favorite of the shiny is looking pretty good this morning. We've got copper is lower by 0.2%. Platinum is higher by 1/3%. Palladium is up by about 1.3%. And WTI crude is higher by $1.31 here, 71.56 for August WTI futures. That's higher by about 1.9%. We'll talk a little bit about why in just a moment. First, let's take a look at Bitcoin. We've got Bitcoin is pretty much right back where it was 2 days ago, $105,642. That's off by about $1,200, giving up all of yesterday's gains to be pretty much right back where we were heading into the weekend. So Bitcoin remains range bound here. Now, let's talk a little bit about what is going on in the world, in the Middle East here. This was the big one last night. This scared a lot of people, self-included. 2 tankers catch fire after a collision near the Strait of Hormuz. 2 tankers collided in waters off the United Arab Emirates and caught fire in the early hours of Tuesday, rattling global oil and shipping markets that have been closely monitoring navigation in the region since Israel began strikes on Iran late last week. The vessels Adeline and Front Eagle crashed about 24 miles east of Khor Fakkan in an incident apparently unrelated to the ongoing fighting. According to a social media post from the UAE's National Guard, 24 crew members on board the Adeline were rescued. It did not provide details about the other ship. UK-based maritime security agency Vanguard Tech said in an alert seen by Bloomberg that no foul play is suspected at this point, with fires contained and crews reported safe. However, they're saying it's not a security incident, but this is related to the conflict between Israel and Iran. News of a fire at the entrance to the Strait of Hormuz caught the attention of shippers and oil traders in morning trading in Asia and the Middle East, sparking fear of a link to attacks between Israel and Iran. Ships traversing the waters in and around the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf have been on high alert due to a jump in jamming, a practice which scrambles navigation signals emitted by hundreds of vessels. And that, in my opinion, and based on everything that I've read this morning, appears to be the cause here. Maybe the Iranians didn't shoot at the tanker, but the GPS scramblers that are being used because of this conflict, all that electronic warfare, that is why these 2 ships ran into each other, because their GPS wasn't working. There's probably a little bit of human error involved as well. I'm sure somebody messed up, but when the GPS isn't working, your vulnerability to human error is highly increased. And we mentioned the story yesterday about how navigation was being disrupted. That's because a lot of these guided munitions that the Israelis and the Iranians are shooting at each other, they're GPS guided. And so both sides are using electronic warfare, scrambling GPS signals You've got ships trying to navigate a 21-mile wide at its narrowest point strait. And sooner or later, you're going to have something like this happen. So maybe they weren't shot at, but it was the war that caused this accident. Luckily, it looks like nobody was hurt. Now, the price of oil, a little bit higher this morning, $71.62, up by 1.6%. Higher than we were yesterday, but well off the highs that we hit at the onset of this conflict. Everybody remains very closely watching what happens in the Strait. Now, the metals are looking great this morning. Again, we talked about silver earlier. Just wanted to show you this chart. 36.97 right now. We're sitting here like knocking at $37. Levels we haven't seen since 2011. Before that, in 1980 with the Hunt brothers. I mentioned a few weeks ago, we're kind of in this territory now where there's not a lot of use in any kind of technicals or pattern analysis because you got clear skies from here pretty much to the high 40s. I'm not saying we're going there. I'm just saying resistance support levels, there aren't any between here and $50. So, silver's probably going to be pretty volatile for the next couple of weeks. I'd also point out the gold to silver ratio. We're right now at 91.8. We're seeing this thing slam lower. Gold to silver ratio. This is just silver starting to outperform gold after years of dramatically underperforming gold. The gold to silver ratio hit a high of 105 on April 22nd as gold was running like crazy and silver was sitting it out. Now we're seeing silver play catch up. And so the stackers are being rewarded for their patience. I suspect this is probably going to continue to move lower for the time being. The historical average is closer to the mid 60s. Some would say even the mid 30s, and some would go even further than that to say it comes out of the ground at a ratio of 8 or 9 to 1. And therefore, the price of silver should be significantly higher considering where gold is. Either way, I like the shiny. All right, let's talk about solar stocks now because they are taking it on the chin this morning. Solar stocks plummet as Senate version of Trump's tax bill cuts renewable energy incentives. Solar stocks were under pressure Tuesday as the U.S. Senate's version of President Trump's spending bill kept cuts to renewable energy incentives. Shares of Enphase Energy plummeted more than 17% in the pre-market, while First Solar dipped about 12%. Sunrun slipped more than 27%, and SolarEdge Technologies dropped 22%. The Senate version of the bill includes a provision that would fully phase out both solar and wind power tax incentives by 2028. It does, however, keep incentives for nuclear, hydropower, and geothermal energy for longer. The renewable energy incentives were key pillars of former President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, the laughably named Inflation Reduction Act. Look, it's silly to be subsidizing wind and solar. This is one of those things, along with things like ethanol subsidies. They should have been cut a long time ago. So, yeah, I'm glad they're doing this. Solar stocks, not so glad they're doing this. Enphase Energy down 21.6% ahead of the opening bell. And Enphase has had a rough year. I mean, they're down 33% year to date, even before this big drop today. So that's probably going to be getting even worse. First Solar, that's another one. That name is down 19% ahead of the opening bell. Also a rough year for First Solar, although they're trading kind of flat versus where they were year to date. Although this move this morning is going to bring that a lot lower. So the big, beautiful bill, the raising of the debt ceiling by $4 trillion or $5 trillion, does it even matter at this point? What's another trillion among friends? At the very least, they're cutting these subsidies. I still don't know, guys. We're still a long way away from having this done. The debt ceiling doesn't become an issue for a couple of months. There's still a few $100 billion in the Treasury General account. You had a lot of defections among Republicans in the House. I don't know what this means in the Senate, if this is going to pass or not. We haven't heard about what the vote counts are currently. All right, let's talk about OpenAI and Microsoft. This is kind of interesting, and there is a lot of money on the line here, $20 billion on the line. OpenAI and Microsoft tensions are reaching a boiling point. The startup, growing frustrated with its partner, has discussed making antitrust complaints to regulators. Go to figure, getting into business with Sam Altman was a mistake. Tensions between OpenAI and Microsoft over the future of their famed AI partnership are flaring up. OpenAI wants to loosen Microsoft's grip on its AI products and computing resources and secure the tech giant's blessing for its conversion into a for-profit company. Again, I still can't get over the fact that OpenAI is a charity. It just talk about a fact that we need to rework our tax code and the way we handle nonprofits. How is OpenAI a charity? Somebody please explain that to me, but I digress. Microsoft's approval of the conversion is key to OpenAI's ability to raise more money and go public. But the negotiations have been so difficult that in recent weeks, OpenAI executives have discussed what they view as a nuclear option, accusing Microsoft of anti-competitive behavior during their partnership. People familiar with the matter said that effort could involve seeking federal regulatory review of the terms of the contract for potential violations of antitrust law, as well as a public campaign, the people said. Such a move could threaten the company's 6-year-old relationship, widely seen as one of the most successful partnerships in tech history. For years, Microsoft fueled OpenAI's rise in exchange for early access to its technology, but the two sides have since turned into competitors, making it more difficult to find common ground. We have a long-term productive partnership that has delivered amazing AI tools for everyone, representatives for the two companies said in a joint statement. Talks are ongoing, and we are optimistic we will continue to build together for years to come. OpenAI and Microsoft are at a standoff over the terms of the startup's $3 billion acquisition of the coding startup Windsurf, the people said. Microsoft currently has access to all of OpenAI's intellectual property, according to their agreement. It offers its own AI coding product, GitHub Copilot, that competes with OpenAI. OpenAI doesn't want Microsoft to have access to Windsurf's intellectual property. OpenAI has a contact licensing deal with the Wall Street Journal's parent company. They're just throwing that disclaimer in there. The companies continue to be at odds over how much of OpenAI Microsoft would own if it converts into a public benefit corporation. Microsoft is currently asking for a larger stake in the new company than OpenAI is willing to give, people familiar with the matter said. OpenAI has to complete the conversion by the end of the year, or it risks losing $20 billion in funding. And let me just tell you guys, that $20 billion in funding is huge. That's $20 billion worth of NVIDIA GPUs being bought and rented from CoreWeave, and all of this SoftBank money that's keeping this AI bubble inflated. If OpenAI cannot pull off this transition into a for-profit company, that $20 billion goes away, and all these amazing mega deals that have been announced for the last few months involving OpenAI become unfunded liabilities on OpenAI's balance sheet, meaning they can't pay for them. And so this is kind of important. Now, Microsoft has an incentive here. If Microsoft doesn't allow OpenAI to make this transition to a for-profit company, and OpenAI does blow up because they can't get their $20 billion in funding, then Microsoft stock is going to go down along with everything else. But at the same time, Microsoft wants a bigger chunk of OpenAI. They paid $1 billion for it several years ago. So this is going to be interesting to watch this one play out over the coming months. Meanwhile, we got retail sales this morning. They decreased 0.9% for the month of May 2025 versus the previous month. A big drop in retail sales. You better believe tariffs played a role in that. People are nervous about the cost of things. People are nervous about how much money they're going to have once price of everything goes up. So retail sales dropped in May. Now, they were actually a little bit flat in April, and they were way up in March. Remember, people were front-running the tariffs, buying things ahead of time. Whatever happened, Liberation Day clearly spooked people, and they spent a lot less money in May. Now, the interesting thing about that is retail sales ex autos, meaning if you don't count cars, retail sales only fell by 0.3%. So a 0.9% fall if you count cars, a 0.3% fall if you don't count them, which means most of that negativity was in the auto sector. People are not buying cars, both EV and internal combustion engines. Automakers are really struggling here, and you can see it in the retail data for the month of May. Meanwhile, import prices were unchanged for the month of May, 0% up or down. So no big changes to what we're paying for imports, but what we're getting for exports actually fell substantially. Export prices in the U.S. fell 0.9% month over month in May. That's the most since October of 2023, and more than expectations for a 0.2% increase. Non-agricultural export prices dropped 1%, as lower prices for non-agricultural industrial supplies and materials more than offset higher prices for capital goods, consumer goods, and automotive vehicles. So we've got export prices down pretty substantially, and they're saying non-industrial supplies, or no, non-agricultural industrial supplies. And I think I know what that is. I think they're talking about ethane. And ethane is one of our biggest exports to China. We had this one from back at the end of May. U.S. ethane exports to China hit new roadblock with license requirement. U.S. exporters face potential disruption to their shipments of petrochemical feedstock ethane after the Commerce Department told them to seek licenses to export to top buyer China. According to sources and shipping data, Chinese petrochemical producers rely on the United States for almost all of their ethane imports, buying about half of total U.S. exports of the gas. Washington ordered a broad swath of companies to stop shipping goods to China without a license and revoked licenses already granted to some suppliers, Reuters reported on Wednesday. Those goods included ethane as well as butane gas. China imported a record 230,000 barrels of ethane per day from the United States last year, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Ethane is a byproduct of oil and gas production and is primarily used to make plastics. So all that cheap dollar store plastic crap that we buy from China, it's made with ethane that is produced here in the United States. We slap these licensing requirements on the ethane exports to China as part of the trade war, and now we're seeing a big decline in export prices to China. I'm thinking those two might be related. And so ethane, I suspect, is the reason why we're seeing that big decline. And one last one before we wrap up here. Let's talk about commercial real estate. Developers are finally dealing with the office oversupply problem. This one just this morning in the Wall Street Journal. Supply is on pace to contract for the first time in 25 years as incentives help accelerate conversions to residential buildings. America has a glut of office buildings. The long-standing surplus is finally shrinking. The number of property demolitions and the pace of office conversions into residential buildings are accelerating. Developers, meanwhile, have greatly slowed new office construction because of questions about future tenant demand. As a result, the amount of office supply in the U.S. is on pace this year to contract for the first time in a quarter of a century, according to real estate services firm CBRE Group. If this trend holds, it would reverse a decades-long office construction spree that flooded the U.S. with too much unwanted workspace. Developers, lured by federal tax breaks, low interest rates, and inflated demand from unprofitable startups, built more office towers than cities needed. The rise of remote work during the pandemic aggravated this excess supply, causing office vacancy rates to rise to record highs and building values to plummet. Conversions of office space into apartments held an obvious appeal, but the cost of acquiring an office building and addressing structural obstacles made these conversions too expensive to work in most cases. Now the pace of office conversions is picking up thanks to the rapidly falling prices of obsolete office buildings, changes to zoning rules that allow for more residential construction, and government incentives that help bring down costs. At the same time, more companies are summoning their office employees back to the office after years of tolerating remote work, sparking new demand for workspace. So we've got supply is finally starting to fall. Look, we are dramatically oversupplied in the office space, so I don't know that this necessarily means higher prices anytime soon. We're still seeing office buildings selling for less than the price of replacing the carpet on the floors in those buildings. So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But at the very least, this glut, this ridiculous build out has finally stopped. We're slowing the pace of construction. The conversions to residential, that is kind of a red herring here. Yes, some of those are happening, but that's not taking any measurable chunk of supply out. Really, it's demolitions and the fact that we're not building as many as we used to is why we're finally seeing the supply contract. And I just want to say thank you very much to Mr. Gordon Guano. Thank you, Gordon, for supporting the channel. He says Big Beautiful Bill has the same acronym as Brazilian butt lift. Well, you know, the bill versus the L, but let's not split hairs. Invest in plastic surgery stocks. Make as much sense as anything else. Hey, why not? The whole economy is fake, so why not invest in plastic surgery stocks? You know, fake cosmetic appearances. You know, why not? It fits the whole motif of the economy. The avoidance of price discovery, the prevalence of Botox and plastic surgery. The two things are pretty similar. Interesting analogy, Gordon Guano, and thank you for supporting the channel, sir. Alex L says, look at them metals. That's right, Alex. I like the shiny gold and silver, both doing pretty good. Gold was a little flat this morning, but I like that move in silver, that $37. Again, guys, I think silver, barring some kind of catastrophic sell-off, I think we're seeing silver probably going to outperform for a couple of months here, just based on that historic gold to silver ratio. Unless gold is about to plummet by a few $100, I think we're going to see silver in the mid-40s in pretty short order here. So I like the shiny as well. Thank you, Alex, for being a Melonhead member for 16 months. Hey, Krusty Whitebread is now a Melonhead member. Welcome back, Krusty. Appreciate the support of the channel. Just a reminder, guys, if you are a Melonhead member, you get a free super chat once a month. So feel free to use that, and I will read and respond to your questions or comments on the air. Thanks again, Krusty. And thank you, Mish, for gifting 10 Nobody Special Finance memberships. Welcome back, Mish. Good to have you back this morning, sir. Mish was on vacation for the last couple of days. Thank you. And by the way, to those 10 new Melon heads, be sure and say thank you to Mish. And feel free to use that once a month super chat. Alex L. What's going on, Alex? He's sending a super sticker. The super stickers don't come across on StreamYard, but it looks like it's a big 20. What's the big 2-0? I don't know. So, yeah, 20. All right. I'm not sure what's going on with the 20 there, Alex, but thank you for supporting the channel, sir. Piggo's Trading Desk says, never pay full price for late pizza. Good morning, bro. Okay, never pay for, what is it? Pizza dude's late, $3 off. That was the big quote from the Ninja Turtles movie when the guy was a couple minutes late with the pizza. Sure. Not sure what we're referring to there with the late pizza, but good morning to you, Piggo, as well. And thank you for supporting the channel. And thank you, everybody, for having your coffee. Oh, look at this. Nope, that's the same one. Never mind. Thank you for having your coffee with the Melonheads this morning, guys. Appreciate all the super chats and the support of the channel. Thank you also to my magnanimous Melonheads on Patreon and YouTube. You guys are awesome. Appreciate everything you do for the channel. Links down below should you feel so inclined. Don't forget that like button and that subscribe button on the way out for the algorithm. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I love you guys. Everyone, until next time, live small and dream big.